Live from the Talking Joe studios, it's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe Weekly Podcast. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe thought we would last. Talking Joe is there. Find each other like a married couple. Our podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there.
Talking Joe is the code name for a completely untrained special podcast force. Its purpose, to produce a regular comic review show while breaking and replacing a series of presenters from across the world.
Talking Joe. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. We are on our soapbox. Nobody seems to care. Fighting for fandom wherever there's trouble. The podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the best and longest running dedicated G.I. Joe comics podcast, the one that comes out on a birthday at any rate. Today we will be talking about G.I. Joe issue 282, but before we get into all of that, let me introduce the Basil Fawlty to my Manuel. It's my co-host, A Real American Tim. It's Tim Finn!
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners. I'm well, and I'm in California.
Wow.
I'm fully vaccinated, and it's been a year and a half since we visited some family. So it was starting to feel urgent, but also doable. So we are visiting family, both near Los Angeles and near San Francisco.
Magnificent. And it's a whistle-stop tour of just seeing lots of people being busy, or is it, some time to chill out as well?
There has been time at the hotel swimming pool and time to sit on a couch with a dog watching the news.
Wow.
Time
Hotels! Exclamation mark. Swimming pools. Dogs. Crikey. What sort of world are we living in?
Also a guest room at the family
Next you're going to be telling me that you've been on a plane or something crazy.
We did fly and rented a car,
What?
sat in some Los Angeles traffic, which always brings to mind the summer of 99 and the summer of 04 and 09 and 12 and 16 when I've made trips to Los Angeles. Lots of sitting in traffic in Los Angeles. But this would not keep me away from the podcast. The release date was June 9th, Wednesday, June 9th.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
I had already left Massachusetts. I was away from my shop. So had my shop gotten A Real American Hero number 282, I would not have been able to get it in time. My store did not get it. And it seems like some East Coast stores did not get this issue, although I haven't, that's anecdotal. But West Coast stores, at least two in California, did, and there was one just 2 miles from my brother-in-law's home. So while the niece and nephew were distracted watching a movie and two of the grown-ups could steal away, we drove down the street to the Comic Cellar. That's CELLAR in Alhambra, and I got their last copy of Real American Hero 282, which was both very exciting and also a little nerve-wracking because you and I had this appointment to record 3 days later, and I had thought perhaps I could have, if it had shown up at my shop back on the East Coast, I could have my manager overnight me a copy in case I couldn't locate one in California, in case there weren't any stores nearby. Other options included seeing if I could get a review copy, like a PDF from the publisher. I'd prefer not to read it on a screen, or joining one of the online comics reading services and subscribing and sort of buying a copy that way. And as a store owner of a brick and mortar comic book shop that sells paper comics, I very much do not want to join Comixology or whoever. Much less to read one comic book. But that was an idea, but the comic seller in Alhambra had it. It was very exciting, both for myself and my wife, because we like to check out comic book stores when we travel. This is something that we do. And had a little kids section in the front. The cash register area was 2 glass cases with, $100 back issues. Left wall was new releases and last week's releases. Middle was some island book shelving with graphic novels. There were maybe 10 long boxes of back issues in the back, and a wall on the right of Funko Pops, and then maybe 10 or 15 long boxes of dollar comics. And one of my favorite things is to find dollar boxes and to buy bad superhero comics from the early 90s that I once owned and got rid of because I needed to make room or it got taste. Buy them again and read a few of them on a trip. Even better, but much rarer, 50-cent boxes. So the comic seller had some dollar bins, and I got some bad superhero comics from 1993, some Marvel UK, some early Image, and some sort of middle early Valiant. Also,
what Marvel?
Also,
Marvel UK did you go for?
Also, I should say some Alan Grant and Norm Brayfogle Batman, which is
nice.
a great find for a dollar bin. What Marvel UK? I got Die Cut #1. Die Cut versus G-Force #1. Some version of Death's Head something. I don't know if it was Death 3 or Death's Head 2 Gold #1. I should note that the artist of Die Cut versus G-Force #1 is John Royal.
Oh, wow.
And his
Very
pencils, both his storytelling and his actual drawing in that issue, are very much in the sort of Liam Sharp 1993 school, Liam Sharp doing Jim Lee in 1992, 1993.
Yeah, I mean, he made a big kind of mark because of his involvement with the creation of Death's Head 2 not too long before that period. And so, yeah, I think if you were operating in the Liam Sharp mold, then you're kind of onto a good thing at Marvel UK at the time.
And for those of you who are scratching your head, as I say, John Royal has had a long cover run on the IDW G.I. Joe or A Real American Hero drawing variant covers, one of which we'll talk about in a moment. So just a bit of synchronicity there. There were no G.I. Joe issues in the dollar bin, either Classic Marvel, which is probably my favorite experience of the last 10 years when I'm at comic book stores, nor more recent ones. But there were G.I. Joe issues in the back issue bins for, $2 and $5 and $10, which is a different kind of thrill, because then I feel like this thing that I love so much is important and coveted.
Cool. And is the comic seller, is it underground?
No, it's
That's disappointing.
If you are, for those of you who are listening to this podcast, I did take a couple not amazing photos, including one of me with my thumbs up in front of the shop. So if you are watching this, the audio version with pictures on YouTube, you have already experienced 4 or 5 or 6 of my not amazing photos from inside the shop, taken very quickly because we had sort of a 20-minute window to get the comic, also buy some things, and get back to the niece and nephew, because that's actually what this visit was about.
Yeah.
Did anything exciting happen in your G.I. Joe week?
What exciting things happened? I got my hat. That was on viewable on the last YouTube video that we did when we caught up with Shane Shimmick and looked at his sketch collection. So I was very excited about having a hat. I've got hay fever, so that's also very exciting. Maybe exciting isn't the right word, but annoying. We have had people painting walls to make our house look less like it's been terrorized by 2 children and a dog. And lined up our next sketchbook chat as well. So we're getting into the big guns here. People with proper collections of real important issues and covers and all sorts, unlike my noodling with my little sketchbooks. So that's exciting. That will follow next month at some point.
If I can say one more thing about the novelty of buying a G.I. Joe comic book at a comic book store, what was embedded in that whole story about finding a shop that was nearby and sneaking out to get it, because we were actually with my brother-in-law for the 2 days to see my brother-in-law and his family, and so the feeling here was anxiety that I might not get the new issue of G.I. Joe in time for this podcast. And having owned my own comic book shop for the past 10 years, that is not a feeling that I have had in a decade, missing the new issue of G.I. Joe or getting it late, right? I know it's going to come a week ahead of time because we get our shipping list, and then it's there. Many copies, in fact, and I can take my pick. And then, for 10 years before that, I had a subscription box, a pull box at my then local comic book store, which is still out there and now just the friendly competition. So the feeling here was a little bit of 1990 or 1995 when, I should say, before I ever found a comic book store, there was a brief period where I was buying G.I. Joe month to month on a rack at a newsstand at a bookstore. And I didn't know when it was going to come out. And early in my reading, I did miss an issue. And so this feeling of, okay, I've got 3 days, either around Los Angeles or in the next one day up in near San Francisco, I have to find a store that has G.I. Joe. It can't be too far away. And this has to be a reasonable, half hour or 2 hour jaunt away from the family homestead. For certainly everyone understands that, this podcast is one of my jobs, but on this sort of desperate and long lost family visit, the feeling, the inertia would be like, no, don't go shopping, stay here, right? The family's here, right? Like, we're going to have dinner, or we're going to sit on the stoop with the niece and nephew. So I'm reading this comic. I felt a little giddy, like, oh my goodness, I have the new issue of G.I. Joe.
Dun dun dun.
So
but
now
behold, Excalibur. Yeah.
Now we can thoroughly talk about it.
Comic talk, oh, comic talk. Larry Hama writes them, Tim and Mark discuss them, whoa. Comic talk, oh, comic talk. Larry Hama writes them, Tim and Mark discuss them, whoa.
So issue 282 released this week, 9th of June, this week at time of recording anyway, but interestingly, interior dated April 2021. So giving us a bit of an insight into some of the scheduling difficulties that have been encountered here. We've got writer, as always, Larry Hama, artist Andrew Lee Griffith, colours Jay Brown, letters Neil Utaki, senior editor Tom Waltz, editor Megan Brown, and research specialist Diana Davis. So the sit rep is Murdered by Assassination Part 2. The Joes have been called to Washington, D.C. in order to explain their recent off-the-books operation in Springfield to rescue Snake Eyes, Operation Snake Hunt. But there's more to the secret congressional subcommittee running the show than meets the eye, and it may be down to the newest Joe of all, codename Sherlock, to reveal the dangerous truth. Dun, dun, dun. Let's have a look at the things that adorn these comics. What are they called again?
Covers.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Cover A is drawn by Andrew Lee Griffith with colors by Jay Brown.
See, Andrew Lee Griffith has stolen all of those letters for his middle name and left Jay with just one initial.
Yeah, last month when you were first rattling off the credits for the issue, I think we were both a tad surprised that Andrew Lee Griffith, who has drawn a lot of Transformers comics for IDW in the last few years, had previously gone by Andrew Griffith and is now going by Andrew Lee Griffith. Just an interesting small change. So this cover is Sherlock and Chuckles in the foreground with their sidearms at the ready, leaning against a Greek revival column. Behind them is the Washington Monument and also the Capitol, the U.S. Capitol, which means they're in Washington, D.C. Night sky. Also behind them is Helix, and she has two fancier pistols, and she's walking towards them. And the image is drawn at, to use a film term, a Dutch angle, where the camera is tilted.
Yeah. So good surname because the cameraman has got a pancake in one hand and isn't very steady.
Knowing my film history, that is absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Notable about the cover is that Chuckles is here. We haven't seen Chuckles in a while. And this is also the sort of proper debut of Sherlock's actual costume, because on the previous cover and in the previous issue, she's in her military fatigues, or she's in, I guess, a hospital gown at the end of the previous issue. This is a fun cover because it asks a question, and the issue, to some extent, answers the question. Right? So who are these 2 or 3 Joes after, or what are they looking at of interest off to the right? In terms of composition and color, I am a little confused about Helix's placement and color treatment, because if you didn't know who Helix was, you might think that this is a bad guy who's sort of sneaking up behind them. And if your response is, well, that pose isn't like sneaking, that is a pose that we see the Baroness in a lot of like covers and pinups and maybe some movie posters. Sort of this this like sexy, dangerous walk with arms low and out, sort of brandishing pistols. So because I know who Helix is, I look at this cover and I think, oh, they've got backup. But in terms of sort of the story of this cover, right, because the lighting on her is different, there's much more blue in her, whereas Chuckles and Sherlock are lit from the left. I feel like her placement and her color, Helix is a little bit sort of fighting with the logic of this image. And if she was just sort of closer up with Chuckles and also, getting ready to like jump around this corner with the two of them, then if you did that, I guess she'd be covering the Capitol building, the dome, but then you can move that to the left. So I do like this cover. The story of it is a little muddled.
Yeah, and we to note as well, we don't see Chuckles on the interior of the issue. Probably the note that was given to Griffith at the time was to include these 3 characters, I guess with the intention that Chuckles probably would appear. Obviously he hasn't, but maybe that's a hint that we will see him later on in the arc, perhaps.
I was, by the end of the issue, I had forgotten that Chuckles was somewhat promised to me. And I finished the issue and I took a breath and I smiled and I flipped back the cover and I said, oh, right, Chuckles. Oh, man, Chuckles wasn't here. What a bummer. And then I thought, as you just alluded to, I bet he's showing up next issue. That's great.
And I'll mention it. When we spoke to Nitho Diaz not too long ago, he was somewhat dispirited that his design for the ARAH version of Helix was not used outside of his own treatment within the pages of Silent Option. And again, we see both here on the cover and on the interiors, the design of Helix that is being used is that of the original design for Helix rather than Nitho's redesign. And I get that it's the more prominent one when artists are doing the research. If they're looking at the toy, if they're looking online at other characterizations, that one will be the one that appears unless they're specifically told to use the other design. And it's probably slightly more striking, to be fair, as well. It's got that kind of the corset kind of look to it, whereas the Nitho Diaz is a slightly sort of pared back, kind of almost superhero-y top look to it. So I can understand the reasons why you might find yourself using it as an artist, but also might want to use it.
This actually made it into my notes as well. I thought the same thing. I thought, hey, isn't that the IDW Chuck Dixon universe continuity design? And either through decision making or attrition, I feel like we're losing the Nitho Diaz redesign, which is a bummer in that anything that gives Real American Hero more of its own identity. I mean, at this point, that it has outlasted the original IDW, what I call the PG-13 IDW continuity, whereas Real American Hero by Larry Hama, I think of as PG. At the same time, the original costume is cool.
I also noticed actually that the variant covers to Silent Option did also feature the Chuck Dixon version of the Helix costume, so it wasn't even on the covers of that original series, they weren't being completely faithful to just one design.
Well, the next time we get a Helix action figure, whether it's in some movie tie-in line or some classified version, we're going to see yet another version, because they're going to either add a bunch of bits or they're just going to sort of, change it and get it half wrong. It's going to be like red, with like pirate boots or something, but yet still yellow and corsety on the top. Cover B is drawn by Freddie Williams II with colors by Andrew Dalhousie. And this is the second of 5 interconnecting covers where we have a tableau in Washington, D.C. in front of some famous D.C. buildings. We see here prominently in the middle ground Roadblock having just punched a Crimson Guardsman, getting pushed away from him, a Viper sort of taking cover, an alley Viper perhaps ready to swing in the background, Duke holding a pistol, and Lady J's holding a submachine gun. I like this cover. I think this is definitely one of those cases where when you lay several pieces of Bristol board next to each other to draw a long gatefold cover or connecting covers, and I should note, I think Freddie Williams II draws digitally, so there may be no Bristol involved. But when you're working extra horizontally with wraparound or connecting covers, you're very much aware of the dividing line between the covers, and so you tend to have a certain bunching of characters, and then a little bit of sort of breathing room or negative space where you can have the edge of a cover. And what sometimes happens with these kinds of covers is, let's say you have 5 connecting covers, maybe 3 of them are really bold and exciting, and 2 of them are a little less so because you just need variety, right? Like if you think of Jim Lee's covers to X-Men #1 in 1991, the cover D, E, I forget, the final one with Magneto, right, is particularly bold. And some of the other covers, are the X-Men just sort of 4 of them at a time, sort of walking, sort of battling left to right. And those are very exciting covers, don't get me wrong. But, the Magneto one, it's all him. So I feel like Roadblock is sort of in his size and positioning, considering what he's doing here, like holding his giant machine gun and having just punched a Cobra. I feel like his position and his pose is not that exciting. This also feels to be sort of a made-up Roadblock costume, which makes me a little sad. And since he's a little smaller and farther away, and he has a made-up Roadblock costume, and Freddie Williams II drew a version of G.I. Joe in the other continuity on some covers for the final series by Aubrey Sitterson. And that Roadblock didn't have a mustache. I'm looking at this cover, this G.I. Joe 282 cover B, and even though it's definitely Real American Hero, I sort of do a double take and think, oh, is this the other continuity? Is that not my Roadblock? Which is
I had the same thought. Is that from another continuity?
And the other thing about this cover that doesn't quite work for me is that because there are so many elements, because Williams II's inking is aggressive, right? Like, yeah, they're clean lines, but he's using an ink wash. So he's drawing in black and white, but then he's also doing like transparent gray ink wash on top of it, for all the shadows and the undersides of things, like the texture on the Viper's helmet and backpack. Then Dalhousie lays color on top of that, and it starts to become hard in this scenario to separate elements from each other. And so characters have white outlines around them.
Yeah.
And, Hector Garrido did that on the earliest G.I. Joe package paintings to make like a G.I. Joe character's arm pop in front of his torso. So this is certainly allowed, but what you also then get is this sort of like tan mush that's around the Viper and the Crimson Guardsman, that's between Duke and Roadblock, which is sort of dirt or smoke and clouds because this tussle is going on. And I think a cleaner inking approach and maybe a cleaner color approach, a less busy one, separates the elements, the people in this better from each other. The other thing that I'm seeing in this cover is that the color and value of this sort of tussle, smoke, nebulous ground on the bottom half of the cover pretty much matches the sort of sunset color on the top half, even though that's mostly blocked by the logo. So this is a good cover. This is not my favorite cover ever for Joe.
Okay, and then the retailer incentive cover, we have got John Royal, who we were just talking about earlier. It's Snake Eyes facing off against Storm Shadow.
Inks as usual by Jagdish Kumar, and colors as usual by James O'Frady. This is a cool cover. This is also an unusual composition for a G.I. Joe cover. We rarely have a character in the extreme foreground who we are sort of with and looking past, and that's Storm Shadow here on the left. I love the colors in this. I love Snake Eyes' pose, which slightly recalls some Snake Eyes poses we've seen over the years, and if you're not looking at this image, also slightly recalls that sort of iconic like Iron Man pose from the first movie where he lands and sort of puts his fist to the ground. But here, Snake Eyes is holding two swords. We're also looking up in this cover. We're on a rooftop, and I see a little bit of like air conditioning crap on the bottom right. We're on a rooftop, and then there are other buildings in the background. And because I'm seeing a water tower, I'm thinking New York City or maybe San Francisco, where the ninja headquarters is for the Joes. Because we don't see Storm Shadow's left bicep, we can't see a Cobra insignia on him. So John Royal has put a Cobra insignia on his right bicep, which is a place on this cover to put a Cobra symbol, so you know that this isn't just any ninja in white, it's the G.I. Joe bad guy ninja in white. This cover is very exciting, and I love it. It only loses points because, as always, Snake Eyes is not in costume in this issue. Storm Shadow is not in this issue. They don't fight in this issue. So it's a wonderful, exciting drawing that has nothing to do with the comic book.
And the Storm Shadow image slightly puts me in mind of issue 38, which is a Mike Zeck cover, which has got Storm Shadow in a sort of similar sort of position, but over on the right, with his sword held up to Destro, who is pointing his gun at him. And different, but similar in terms of we're kind of looking over the shoulder of Storm Shadow. And curiously enough, that is actually a cover that I had commissioned John Royal to recreate. So I own the version of that as drawn by John Royal, which I'll be sharing at some point in a future sketch show. So I might even hold off putting it on the video.
What a great tease. Once again here, James O'Frady does really gorgeous color work where our two foreground characters and the little bit of foreground environment, the stuff they're standing on, is all warm colors, right? Storm Shadow isn't actually white here. He's light blue. and Snake Eyes, the black parts of his costume have a lot of light blue in them. And then the background is all warm, right? So foreground cool, background warm. The background is all reds and magentas going down to orange and yellow. And then the sort of highlights on these characters is as if by moonlight, though the moon in the background is knocked back with some red. But the color clarity and language of this cover is great. And one of the things that John Royle does really well here, which I appreciate, is the composition is quite precise. So if you look at all the elements, so Snake Eyes' sword, his scabbard, his other sword, his pistol sidearm, Storm Shadow's ninja star, throwing star in his left hand, the sword in his right hand, the dagger tucked into his belt, the quiver of arrows, the little bit of scabbard from Snake Eyes that's under Storm Shadow's chin. All of these elements are very carefully arranged so that nothing is covering up anything in an unsatisfying or unclear way. Each of them, their symbols are very clear, and yet their poses are not compromised in order to arrange all of these elements for clarity and satisfaction. Not easy to do, right? We think of comics artists as people who draw, but they're very much people who arrange and lay out. And this cover is very nicely laid out, considering, is even stronger, is gorgeously laid out, considering how activated and busy it is. And I mean busy here in a good way. Sometimes when I say things are busy, I don't mean a good way.
And I think you used the word precise, and I think that's a good way of describing John Royle's art, is that it is very clean, very precise, that every line is very carefully thought about. He will work things through multiple roughs. He will often work on characters individually and the background even individually at times, and then sort of assemble things together. So it's got that very clean, precise look to it. And as nice an image as it is, I'd prefer it if we saw something else. To be honest, it's hard to get excited by a Snake Eyes, a new Snake Eyes illustration. I think, particularly when we're in the middle of such an interesting new storyline, it would be nice to see something tying into that.
Yeah, this could be, one of the 17,000 variant covers for the Rob Liefeld Snake Eyes Dead Game miniseries. I mean, there's a comic that very much calls for random but gorgeous Snake Eyes versus Storm Shadow covers. But if something like this was, Helix and I don't know why Helix and Chuckles would be squaring off in this same composition, and certainly there are no water towers like this in downtown DC, but if you redrew this cover with some characters from this issue, like the mystery villain from this issue.
Yeah.
What a segue.
Okay, because there is a mystery villain in this issue, as we will find out in the plot breakdown. In the Capitol building, the G.I. Joe Oversight Committee is holding a hearing to review the G.I. Joe attack on Springfield, as detailed in the Snake Hunt storyline. The team is represented by a JAG specialist caseload. In the courtroom are Scarlet, Snake Eyes, Hawk, and new character G.I. Joe accountant Bottomline. Helix and Stalker provide armed security support. In the hearing, the Joes have to justify disobeying the orders to launch a rescue attempt for Snake Eyes. Meanwhile, outside the Senate chamber, Crimson Guard Fred 501 is attempting to gain access in order to use the trigger word to activate sleeper agent Senator Wendy Ling Torres by claiming to be Wade Collins. Sherlock is undercover nearby, and reporting back to the team at the pit, they realise it is a Fred agent. But a mysterious Cobra in a long coat, hat, scarf and sunglasses prevents Sherlock from intervening before he escapes the chamber, but not after killing Senator Thormund Lartner and making his escape.
Top down, what was your reaction, Mark?
I enjoyed it. I felt and coming to do that recap, plot breakdown, thinking about all of the things that were happening and how and what were the most important things to cram in. It was a lot of back and forth of, you know, Cobra Commander back at Springfield, the Joes in the pit, what's going on in the courtroom, you know, what's happening with the Joes, what's happening with the senators at the front, then back to the front of the Senate with Sherlock and the new mysterious Cobra and the Fred. It moved very quickly, and it was a different ish sort of feel to the issue than not just last issue, where that was, you know, big military, you know, outdoors, Middle East, lots of vehicles, lots of explosions, lots of actions. This is now smaller, quieter, courtroom, character based. You know, still part of the same arc, and still, you know, there's stuff there joining it, but very different feel to it, and it's very different feel to not just the last issue, but I think a inverted commas normal G.I. Joe issue. It's this kind of courtroom intrigue. We've not really seen an awful lot of that outside of perhaps the jugglers giving the Joes a bit of a hard time at times.
Yeah, as with you, I was struck, and very pleasantly so, by that this is a complete and satisfying story on its own, and yet also a part of a larger story. The courtroom excitement reminded me of two. I guess it's not a courtroom. I guess the Senate hearing, the closed door Senate hearing, reminded me of two things. One, there's a scene in the animated G.I. Joe movie from 1987 where Falcon's in trouble and he's getting some kind of court-martial, and Hawk and what look like Slipstream and Wild Bill and some other sort of Joe brass, maybe Keelhaul, who, you know, we never saw in the animation. Anyway, they're five. He's standing before a panel of five high-ranking officers, and the rest of the Joes are sort of watching in the gallery as he's tossed out of the Joes. So even though the stakes and the scenario were different here in terms of an echo of a G.I. Joe story, since we haven't had courtroom stuff, that reminded me of this. And then also, page one, right, seeing the Capitol from the outside, seeing Statuary Hall in panels 2 and 3, on the inside, and then seeing a now familiar angle on the sort of front desk of the senatorial chambers in the Capitol. Inescapably is the shadow of the events of January 6th, 2021, the real life events, which, you know, like I watched on the news that day as it was happening, and I recall, and I didn't grab it from Facebook 4 months ago or whatever it was, but after that, around then, on Facebook, Larry Hama posted something like, I'm paraphrasing here, something like, "I've got a scene at the Capitol where someone attacks someone else, and now I have to rewrite it."
Right, crumbs.
Or maybe it was even more specific. Maybe it's like, I have a scene where a government official is killed in or around the Capitol, and now I have to rewrite it. It's something like that. And from the context, I got the sense that this was not editorial saying, "Ooh, you got to change that." That this was a decision that either something in the G.I. Joe story had inadvertently, which he had plotted, now felt too similar to what happened in real life, and it would be distracting to readers, or the writing of the story was now sort of made moot or ineffective, and that reminded me of 2 or 3 events in the last many years where like the ending of a movie or a TV show has been changed because of something big in the news, and then the timing feels painful and insensitive.
I was going to say, for example, the Twin Towers loomed quite large in the original Spider-Man trailer, and then was, I think, removed from
the movie,
from the actual movie. Yeah.
And the very first episode of 24 features a terrorist blowing up a plane, and it was It was when the episode made it to air. This was, after September 11th, 2001. When the episode made it to air, I felt like that scene was sort of directed a little indirectly. It's like it still happened, but they didn't make as big a deal of it visually. Anyway, so reading this entire issue, January 6th, loomed large, that there's something fascinating and upsetting and terrible that's happening in the senatorial chambers.
I just looked up the quote from Larry while we were talking. So 7th of January, he posted, "Had to totally rethink a story I'm writing that started off with a congressional hearing." So, what's significant is that I think anyone globally seeing the real life events of January the 6th, it just gripped everyone and specifically people in the States and plugged into what was going on. It's one of those real world events where the world stops and gasps and, can't quite think of anything else that's happening at that time. And writing this issue, inescapably, the shadow would have, been cast over it and would have been an influence to some degree, whether Larry would be trying to sensitively navigate the pathways of not trying to look like he's cashing in on the ideas or be too on the nose, to the extent that maybe this plot was kind of in the air at that time before, and it sounds like that was the case, and that he's tried to kind of find a way through it in post the events such that he can deliver then the issue that he's happy with in the knowledge of everything that's happened in the real world.
Yes, that's a fine button you put on that idea that I was trying to set up. All right, so page 1 in panel 3 at the bottom. Mm-hmm. We see 5 people, and they're looking at a U.S. Capitol police officer, and one of them in the foreground has blonde hair, a light blue shirt with a coat over it, and his hands in his pockets, and he's somewhat away from the other 4. And I thought, oh, it's Chuckles undercover. Because Chuckles is on the cover of this issue, so I've been promised Chuckles. And I know that the Joes are doing something at the Capitol, and they're worried about a leak or a budget cut or something, or a murder by assassination, perhaps. And it turns out that is not Chuckles. That is a Fred clone. So that was a fun, inadvertent misdirect.
Yeah, and what I'm also seeing for the first time looking at this again is that the chap that we'll see later on in the long coat and the hat is also there on page 1.
I'm going to call that guy for now Mystery Bad Guy, because we don't know who he is at all. And I think Mystery Bad Guy takes less time to say than the chap in the hat and the coat and the sunglasses. The composition of this final panel on page 1 is really nice because Sherlock is off to the left by herself, looking right. So she's watching either Fred or Mystery Guy, that married couple, and the U.S. Capitol Police, or she's looking at one of them or she's listening, and then immediately to the right, but closer to us, there's this Fred clone, and then immediately there's Mystery Guy, who really disappears into this panel in the previous one, despite the fact that, according to the rules of crime or action fiction, he's the one who should stick out because of this costume, right? It's like what he's wearing is a cliche. What I also like about this first page is I don't recall from the end of the previous issue that anyone says, "Oh, we're going to," or Hawk says, "You're going to a closed congressional subcommittee hearing." But through the dialogue on this first page, Hama sets up what is happening. And it is expositional dialogue, but it's not, it doesn't hit me over the head. It's not, oh man, I can't believe we've just arrived at the Capitol for a congressional closed door, like someone asks a question. so can we see the Senate chamber? I'm sorry, the chamber is closed to the public today. Like, oh, and that pulls me in. Like, why? I better keep reading and turn the page, right? And then it turns out that there are Joes, and it's a small thrill because one of them we've never seen. One of them we've only seen for a panel or two in the previous issue. The rest of them, and all of them, are in their dress blacks. We spoke with Diana Davis in a previous episode about what the Joes are wearing when they're in their dress uniforms. Is it dress greens? Is it dress blues? Would it be different depending on which branch of the armed service a Joe is in? Would Shipwreck and Footloose be dressed differently? And we saw Hawk in black in the previous issue, which confused me, but I also don't quite know in 2021 what Hawk would wear. And so for sort of consistency here, all the Joes in the scene are in this same dress black. I also like that, as Hama always does, through dialogue, Stalker introduces everyone to the readers. And yes, even me, a longtime Joe reader and crazy person fan, like, okay, like there's a female Joe with red hair on the left. I know that's Scarlet. And then there's a Joe with short brown hair and sunglasses. And I'm thinking that's Throwdown, but I don't actually know. Maybe that's Hawk, because he's got sunglasses on, because in the Deke episodes based on that action figure, the talking battle commander, maybe Hawk's got sunglasses, right? And then I thought it was Stalker for a second, but that's Caseload, and then there's Hawk, and then there's Stalker, and then there's Bottom Line. So, and then similarly, in this expositional dialogue, Caseload explains in a quick exchange with Senator Raleigh why Helix and Stalker are A, also there, B, in uniform, C, armed. And it's a great exchange that sets up the stakes, right? Like, there might be he doesn't say this, there might be a murder by assassination attempt, Senator. And it's nice to see Senator Ling Torres, who we haven't seen since, what was the arc around 225 called? Cobra World Order.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she got that tour, right? In the Cobra World Order prologue, which was a regular monthly issue of G.I. Joe, but was not a numbered issue. And then Cobra later on brainwave scanned her, and ever since I have been wondering when and worried if Cobra would activate her and she'd ruin everything for the Joes.
Today.
Almost today. We come really close in this issue, which is great for tension, right? Because it's this is, the part of the plot here is that this Fred clone is trying to get through the closed doors of this Senate subcommittee hearing to activate a Cobra sleeper agent, which is such a great use of the brainwave scanner, right? Like, we've seen a lot of stories where someone gets strapped in, or Cobra Commander is trying to get someone strapped in. Less so the sort of will they or won't they anxiety and tension of, no, this person already got strapped in. Like, this story was promised to you many issues ago, and now we're going to follow through, or maybe right at the last minute, not, and the good guys save the day.
Yeah, literally years ago at this point. So it's the long game. And Senator Ling Torres is the sleeper agent, but ironically, the person sat next to her, the elderly senator, is at times sleeping during this hearing by the looks of things, the way that he's drawn on a panel up on page 3.
And then the second bit of irony here, and I believe I am using this word irony correctly in the sense of literature,
is it rain on someone's wedding day?
I mean the author knows something that the reader viewer doesn't, or the reader viewer knows something that the characters don't. I believe those are the two kinds of irony: situational irony and dramatic irony. If my recollection of 8th grade English class is correct.
I thought it was when you had a fork when all you need is a knife.
I think there were some knives on the retailer incentive cover of this issue.
Okay, sorry, Tim. Continue.
The irony here, besides your wonderful sleeper pun, is that we know Senator Ling Torres can cause trouble for the Joes because Cobra got to her. We don't know until the end of the story, until the middle of the story, that Senator Lardner, next to her, is also a sleeper agent. And one of the things that Larry Hama does in G.I. Joe stories is invent this kind of redundancy. You know, like you're reading a Joe story and there's some Joes, like, I don't know, in a tank in the jungle, and they're like, we got to take out that bad guy across the way. And like 5 pages later, it turns out that another Joe is like a mile further up the jungle with a sniper rifle, you know, and then like 20 miles up, there are 2 Joes piloting a plane, and that's going to pick them up, right? And the layers get peeled back. So good drama. I appreciate in this issue that Andrew Lee Griffith draws different faces on everyone. Senator Raleigh, her it's not just that she has glasses and her hair is, you know, a little shorter than Ling Torres. Her face is wider. And particularly in the scenes back in the pit where Duke, Psych-Out, and Mainframe are, Griffith is attempting and pretty successful at drawing not just different hair, but different noses and like cheekbones and chins on Duke, Psych-Out, and Mainframe. Griffith does this again with the Fred clone, right? His eyes are a little closer together. Duke is a little beefy, both, you know, in his neck and his face. So I appreciate these differences, you know, particularly in an issue that's mostly talking heads. How did you feel about the art in this issue?
I don't know that it was necessarily as strong as the first issue, and I think it's a difficult issue for an artist, and you know, particularly an artist on G.I. Joe, where I'm sure the artist will go in hoping for lots of action and adventure and excitement, and you've got a lot of talking heads. It felt at times like perhaps it might have been there might have been maybe more time pressure. That you know, that's just a guess. That perhaps that might have meant that maybe some things were perhaps looking, you know, looking less polished, perhaps, or less detailed. There's quite a few panels where there's not a lot in the way of background, and I you know, wonder at times whether that's necessarily stylistic choice or just pragmatic way of saving time. We've talked about before about the need for background in every single panel. You know, if it's been established as, you know, you've got a good sense of place, you don't need it in every single background. So it's not necessarily bad per se, but you know, it's a choice or evident in the issue.
I want to take that idea a touch further. I do think I think there's some circumstantial evidence that Griffith didn't have as much time to draw this issue, because we know that he's not drawing the next issue, which suggests that the schedule is getting a little backed up. More than just many panels don't have backgrounds, particularly in the second half of the issue, Griffith keeps the camera to close-ups or medium shots, right? A close-up in film language is head and shoulders, and a medium shot is waist up, and then a long shot is full body. He keeps the camera mostly at close-ups and medium shots. Where he's doing long shots full body, there's either not much background or no background. And the sort of test or like tell for me that this is a little rushed is that he never swings the camera back and down to show all of the seats behind these 6 Joes who are in the front row, right? I mean, if you think of the Senate chambers, it's not just this fancy sort of tribunal desk podium thing in the front. It's also like 100 chairs in a semicircle around it. And then the upper galley, we never see the upper galley. Gallery. We never see the upper gallery. When Mystery Bad Guy jumps up on the front desk to execute the senator, a few panels earlier, when Sherlock barges through the door, when on the next page, Throwdown tackles mystery bad guy and then lunges for the grenade. Griffith is not drawing, is not pulling the camera back. There's never a very wide shot where we see many, many characters scattered, very small, with lots and lots of chairs and sort of curved, raised, like steps, like in bleachers or in a stadium, which is how the Senate chamber works. And the story is all clear. I'm never like confused where someone is or where someone went. It's never like, is that so-and-so's hand or someone else's hand? But this is, I think, indicative of some reasonable shortcuts for a time crunch.
Yep. We've just got Andrew Griffiths credited as the artist, haven't we? So he's doing both pencils and inks, assuming that he's working in that fashion. So he's a one-man team in terms of the division of labor there. Be good to hopefully we can get a chance to talk to him and find out how his technique and approach to his art works. Whether with combining with an inker might have freed him up to maybe take a slightly different approach to the pencils and not knowing that he had to then ink himself. What's I did notice about the style is that he uses quite a fine line in terms of his inks. There's like it's a relatively fine micron or something like that. It's not there's not a lot of thickness to most of his lines, or even sort of a huge amount of spotted blacks. That's quite an open style with a relatively thin line.
Yeah, as with the last issue, I would love to see Griffith inked by someone who is adding a lot of heft. I'm just going to throw two names out, right? There's no reason that IDW would hire, Tom Palmer, who might be retired at this point. Tom Palmer inked a lot of Marvel in the 70s and 80s and 90s. But Tom Palmer inks with a lot of heft. Or to go in a different direction, Klaus Janson, who inks with a lot of heft and also makes things, I say this in a complimentary way, dirty and scratchy. And like on the cover, there are some very thin lines for Chuckles' forehead and his cheekbone, and I think that's fine. But I'd also be really happy with a line 7 times that thickness for, like the bottom of his jaw and where his arm ends and the sky behind it begins, or the background behind it begins. Again, the art style doesn't get in the way of clarity, and there is weight to his characters. They don't feel like they're going to blow away if I sneeze in front of my comic book. But just from a graphical standpoint, he's drawing with a real light touch, and I would just like more weight.
Yeah, someone who might do a good job is Guillermo Ortego, who was inking Jason Burrows on Punisher Soviet, and he sort of got a good ability to follow a sort of quite a detailed line, but then be able to vary up the sort of the weight of that line as he's going. Yeah, very impressed with his work, and it might be quite a complementary style. But
as we've seen Brian Shearer ink many issues of G.I. Joe, and in a few cases get called in to ink someone who was to pencil and ink their own issue of G.I. Joe, sort of for like consistency and inertia. I wonder, could Brian Shearer, what would his inks look like on top of Griffith? From a editorial standpoint, it is a little. You can stretch the budget further if you're the editor of a comic and someone is penciling and inking, as opposed to if you have a penciler and an inker. Yeah. I was a little surprised in this issue that there were no footnotes for the 3 flashbacks. And I know that Snake Hunt as a story arc gets referred to in the recap on the inside front cover, but 3 times we see a drawn flashback to either the events of Snake Hunt. There's this reference to when Senator Lynn Torres was brainwave scannered, and this one I don't think would need a footnote, but we even see a tiny visual flashback to the long-range reconnaissance patrol, the LRP group back in Vietnam, when Duke and company are trying to figure out if it's really Wade Collins. Yeah. I don't mind that there were no footnotes, but this is a series that has always used them, so it's more than welcome to continue using them.
Yeah, I guess the Snake Hunt thing, flashbacks in particular, should be pretty close in people's memories, given that it was in terms of G.I. Joe continuity, it was only 2 issues previously. Even if if you get what I mean, if you skip past the Untold Tales, most of these events were from the very last episode of Snake Hunt, which only then has the first issue of Murder by Assassination in between, in terms of the storytelling continuity.
Something that Larry Hama does here, which I like. So he's always come up with clever and funny explanations or excuses for the Joes doing things that they're not allowed to. It's fun, and it in this case, it's fun, and it adds tension that they get called out for it, right?
Absolutely.
So we have previously seen, I think this happened once or twice in the Marvel run, this threat of it's like, well, we can't go on this mission, or we can't rescue this person. It's like, I think I'm going to take my leave right now, and maybe I'll mosey as a private citizen. Maybe I'll mosey over to that place and rescue my friend or complete that mission. And that's a big part of Snake Hunt. And much of Hama's G.I. Joe is this military group doing what it does. And as often as we talk about the jugglers on this podcast, they actually don't show up very much. This idea that there'd be congressional oversight to the mission and budget of G.I. Joe. So it's a welcome plot point that it comes up again here. I also appreciate that this issue doesn't have the jugglers, because I feel like that became a little overused, or certainly with the Devil's Due run, a little gimmicky, or sort of overused and underused at the same time. But so in a previous issue, the Joes are all going to take vacation at the same time, so they can basically disobey orders. And Caseload explains, and they get called out on it here by one of these senators in this really great exchange, and then Caseload talks it down, does an end run around it. Hawk says, "We put a request for rescue mission through channels, and we were denied." And then Bottom Line picks up, "Lack of funding was the given reason, but the Joe team has been operating under budget for years. The original requisitions were channeled through Black Ops funding based on seized illicit assets that fell under the Schrödinger-Katzen Act, specifying," and then Senator Raleigh interrupts, "You can dispense with the boilerplate poppycock. What I want to know is why you took it upon yourself to disobey orders, ... This is fun, and this is great, right? Who can stop the Joes? Cobra, the Joes themselves, right? This mission isn't worth it, or oh no, I've been hurt, call off the mission. And a senator, right? Larry Hama has invented terms and countries, and we have one here, which I can leave for you to call out later.
Let's cover it now.
All right, so this is Hama time, Hammer time.
Stop! Hammer time!
Time to beat the soles of your boots with my face. Sucking chest wounds, red ninjas, brain scanners, rubber oozes, blue ninjas. And then some more sucking chest wounds. Hammer time!
So what this is supposed to look like is some piece of government, some government rule, right? The Schrödinger-Katzen Act, which specifies something about channeling government funds from one column to another, right? And so if you're a kid and you're reading this, you're thinking like, oh, that's some like fancy government stuff that I don't understand.
Yeah.
Cool, right? If you're a little bit older, you might think, I wonder if that's real. I should look that up. And then you do, and you realize that this is just a reference to Schrödinger's cat, which is this. Can you describe it? It's this.
So
it's this concept.
Yeah, it's a thought experiment that illustrates a paradox of quantum superposition. In the thought experiment, a hypothetical cat may be considered simultaneously both alive and dead.
So what Hama is doing here is he's making up some important and real sounding gobbledygook that explains how the Joes can have the money and also not have the money. So he's, as a writer, he's just performing some sleight of hand, because he's faking me, the reader, out, who takes him at his word. Like, this must be a real thing. Or if it's not a real thing, it's Hama like probably renaming a real thing and like putting it sort of a simpler version or a more modern version or like a kid version in the G.I. Joe universe. But no, it's just gobbledygook. And the first half the line, right? The original requisitions, right? Our original requests for money, our original, like, we're going to get the money, were channeled through Black Ops funding based on seized illicit assets. That's a real thing, right? Like, how does government pay for the military? Well, either we, like, take the pie chart of the congressional budget and we slice a slightly larger piece for the military, right? Appropriations. Either we, the government like needs a toilet seat, and a toilet seat normally costs $5, and the government says it costs $25, and so those $20 get like funneled to, I don't know, the Green Berets, or we like take down some drug dealer in another country, or maybe our own, and they've got a bunch of money, and we just take that money and we give it to the Green Berets, right? So this line starts out as actually what happens and what would happen. And then Hama, this is hiding in plain sight, right? Like, the Schrödinger Katzen Act, right? Like, you Google that and it's not a real thing. And you realize this is a reference to, so this is Hama being clever and funny and not taking it too seriously. And then the fact that in the story, the senator calls her on it, right?
Yeah.
Let's dispense with the boilerplate poppycock, right? Like, that's really funny. But
Stop
also
fobbing me off with, technical jargon that doesn't really mean anything, and it doesn't really relate to the actual question that is being asked here. But I like that idea that you came up with, that, well, the sort of the illusion that Larry's coming up with, that the G.I. Joe team is simultaneously funded but not funded.
because in the real world, like, how could G.I. Joe ever actually be funded, right? Like, in the comic, in the TV show, it's like, how many Sky Strikers go down? Isn't a Sky Striker like a $20 million jet? And they go through a lot of them. I mean, less in the comic than in the show. And at the same time, I don't think Hama is like sitting at his desk. I mean, I do think he sits at his desk and stares, because that's what writers do. They sit at their desk and they stare, and they're just thinking, right? They're like problem solving internally. I don't think he spent like days on this. Like, how do I come up with a line of dialogue that's going to explain? I think he had a notion and like wrote this very funny line, which I think his experience in writing for many years means that this idea came to him somewhat quickly. And to some extent, we could see this as him making fun of himself.
Yeah.
Right. Because like at this point, like in previous issues, we saw like Rudatistan, like a fictional Middle Eastern G.I. Joe country named after Ron Rudat. Right. Like, all the fans are older. We know who Ron Rudat is. So that one jumps out. As a kid, like Barovia, it's like, yep, I take that at face value. That is an invented country, but I'm not going to think about it, right? Anyway, so I like both the context, the subtext, and the symbolism of this exchange, and that it happens between a new Joe we've never seen before and a senator who we've never seen before is extra interesting, because, if this was like Cobra Commander and Dr. Mindbender, or Hawk and Psych Out, it would have a different resonance,
Yeah.
right? But this is all part of like, I think the Joes might get in trouble and get like, I don't know, court-martialed or defunded or something by the end of this issue.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in the issue, it really does feel like the Joes on the ropes, and I think it's an important, storytelling point, and it's an importance beyond that story to tell. At the time when we were reading Snake Hunt, we were sort of somewhat incredulous at some of the, the story about the whole of the team being granted leave at the same time as, like, we were saying that's no way for a large organization to behave. You'd surely get in trouble with HR at some point down the line for letting everyone go at the same time. And then hold up, they're on vacation and they're in their military vehicles and shooting up a nice little American town. It feels like if they didn't do this, it would be a sort of a leap too far in terms of what the Joes could do and get away with that without it being acknowledged. So I think this issue is an important, an important reaction to the Snake Hunt stories that of acknowledging that it does look like the Joes have gone too far or acted in a way that wouldn't be overlooked, and that there does need to be sort of consequences of some sort. So it's absolutely essential. It's recognized and acknowledged and done well here.
There's also a layer here where, so in the real world, we know that there are several special forces groups in the military, but we don't know what their missions are. Sometimes they're declassified after, and we don't know who is in these groups. And in the G.I. Joe story, right, in the comics and the cartoon, there's always been between the two of them a different sense of just how secret or top secret G.I. Joe is. In a later Deke episode, the president wants to give G.I. Joe a parade. And we don't do that with Delta Force, right? Because then you'd know who they are. So there's this thing here where there are some Joes, right? And they've come to DC, but it's a closed door hearing, and the Joes are only identified by their code names. And so the three senators get to talk about funding and sort of the role of this group. So I like the realistic take here, because G.I. Joe is ultimately only half realistic. So I appreciate that nod to, it's like, okay, how would you actually do this, right? Because there could, in a different G.I. Joe comic, there would be a scene where just Hawk goes to talk to the jugglers, or just Hawk goes to the Senate. And there's more drama here because it's Hawk plus several Joes who we know, and again, 2 Joes who we don't. And the fact that they're in their dress uniforms changes the context. If they were all in their G.I. Joe costumes, it might be a little more fun. It's like, I don't want to read a story where Bruce Wayne is in disguise as Matches Malone. I want to read a story where Batman punches a bad guy. But this is what the Joes would do. And then again, like, you have a numbers person and you have a lawyer, right? Like, Caseload is a JAG, right? And that's awesome. I don't know that a Caseload figure in this costume would sell, right? If the fan club were still around, and we're doing releases through the club, the collectors club, or through the convention, it's like, maybe you can take Dress Blues, Gung Ho, and do a new head, or I don't know, take Stalker's head and color it differently.
There was actually a Batman story. I think it was called Mr. Wayne Goes to Washington, which was in the aftermath of the Cataclysm events, where
it is technically part of the Road to No Man's Land.
Indeed, yeah. So the Road to No Man's Land, yeah. So Gotham has been devastated by an earthquake, and Batman can't really punch an earthquake. So his role there is that Bruce Wayne is therefore much more important and significant, and using his Bruce Wayne persona to go to Washington and try and lobby for aid to pull Gotham out of the hole that it's in, which this is a bit of a deviation, but it's it's sort of thematically connected to this issue in terms of the difference in approach and the battle that Bruce Wayne was having there to try and secure funding for Gotham is, just as important as what's happening for the Joes here in battling in a hearing environment to justify their actions and their existence, with the stakes potentially being even higher than a battle against Cobra, where they could lose and walk away and be back to fight another day. If they lose here, it could result in the GI Joes being heavily censured in some form, potentially even facing some sort of criminal action against for the activities that they took.
That's a good. So if we, so Hama in interviews for many years has said that he writes GI Joe. He writes all of his comics one page at a time. That when he's writing page 2, he doesn't know what's going to happen on page 20. He doesn't know how the issue is going to end. And I think when we read these stories, we sometimes forget that or take that for granted. It's like, well, surely he kind of knows where the story is going to go. And, this is a 5-part story arc. So I get the sense that he has some idea where the end of chapter 5 is going to be. But I have to imagine that in writing pages 5 and 6 of this story, where the senator might cut off funding or court-martial a Joe or something, or a page later when Fred might get inside, the Fred clone might get inside and then does, and is about to activate Senator Ling Torres as a Cobra sleeper agent, that there's a very good chance, as Hama was writing this, that those things were going to happen, and that the issue was going to end up with the Joes in a terrible place, whereas the issue ends with the Joes having demonstrated to the senators, the 2 remaining senators, that not only was were the events of Snake Hunt justified, but that GI Joe's existence is justified and urgently needed. So reading this issue at the beginning, your top down comment was that there's a lot of cross cutting, to use a film term, right, back and forth between there's the Cobra Command is at Springfield. There are the Joes in the pit. There are the Joes in the Senate chambers, and then there are the characters just outside trying to get inside. And even within that, there's a Joe, a Cobra, and a mystery someone. And what I like so much about this issue is not just the cross-cutting, but that the whole issue builds tension, that the stakes get raised from page 1 to page 18, 19, 20, and that I keep getting surprised. Oh, it looks like this Capitol police officer is going to successfully keep this Crimson Guardsman in civilian clothes out. Okay, good. Oh, he's getting inside. Okay, well, surely Stalker's going to know that this is a Cobra and not his old friend. Stalker was convinced. He thinks it's his old friend. Okay, well, surely, right? It keeps going, right? And then sort of the big reveal at the end that it's not Senator Ling Torres, it's Senator Lardner. It's not the word, the what is it? Code word, password, trigger word that would unleash Senator Ling Torres as a Cobra sleeper agent. It's just a bribe for Senator Lardner. Cobra Commander makes Cobra Commander makes a reference to a campaign contribution from Cobra, and it's not the hypnosis of Lardner. I mean, there's all this satisfying redundancy in the story. I mean, redundancy, not like ideas being repeated, but additional ideas being layered. So Senator Lardner has this USA flag pin on his lapel, and I noticed it early on because it's one of those things it's a very small prop, and yet it has a lot of detail because the colorist comps in these little stripes on it, so you just sort of notice it, as opposed to the entire space of this guy's forehead or his jacket or the desk. And I thought, that's USA flag pin. And then suddenly Cobra Commander's talking about it, and then suddenly it's a camera, and also it's an RF jammer, right? And then the Joes they're cut off back at the pit. Mainframe's we're being jammed. So lots of fun, considering no one pulls out a machine gun and drives a tank.
Yeah. I like this idea of Larry writing from page to page and not knowing maybe if the Joes are going to triumph at the end of this story or not. So it's almost like Schrödinger's cat that in the middle of the story, the Joes are simultaneously winning and losing.
Larry Hama is in the middle of the story simultaneously knowing where it's going and being satisfied, and also like panicking and not knowing where it's going. So there is one small storytelling bit which is not confusing, but a little lightly unsatisfying. Mystery. This is very small. Mystery bad guy. Throwdown tackles him. He pulls out a grenade and tosses it at Scarlet.
Mm-hmm.
Throwdown jumps for it, which is wonderful because Throwdown is a version of Snake Eyes, and we expect Snake Eyes to sacrifice himself for Scarlet, and also any Joe to sacrifice themselves for any other Joe. And in that same panel that Throwdown is lunging, Mystery Bad Guy pulls out a grappling hook. And then in the next panel, he's swinging like Spider-Man over these sort of semicircle of desks. And then in the next panel, he makes it to the door and rushes out, and he's laughing. So two tiny things I don't quite understand. One, what does he throw his grappling hook at?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the answer is like the upper gallery of the Senate, but also like, how does he swing? Because if you're low, you have to like jump up really high to start the sort of the edge of the pendulum to swing forward. So I'm just gonna, it's close enough, right? Like he gets away. I'm 80% clear on how like physiologically he gets away, right? Does he use his leg muscles? Is there some like spongy tension in the grappling hook rope? Whatever. Two, in that final panel, as he's making his way through the door, he's laughing, ha 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 ha, and there's a big sound effect, bang. And I thought, did someone shoot him? Is he shooting someone? Did he just shoot himself by accident? Oh my gosh, did the grenade go off? Well, why would that be off panel? And then in the next panel, Scarlett's holding the grenade and she says, plastic dummy. He had to get it through the security metal detectors, right? Which is another like great Hama-ism where Larry Hama is just thinking very smartly about the logic of this scene, right? Like if that didn't happen, 500 people would read this comic and 3 of them or 60 of them would say, wait a minute, how did this guy sneak a grenade through the metal detector? In looking at this page now, I think the bang is just the sound of the door slamming open.
Yeah.
But in comics, bang is a sound effect for doors getting pushed open. But it's much more often the sound of a gun going off. So I was a little confused there. So this thing about the grappling hook and sort of where the mystery bad guy is swinging from and to and winching to, this to me is another small example of what I think is artist Andrew Griffith's less time than normal to draw this. Because you might pull the camera back and like put it sort of on the table where the 3 senators are and show like the back of mystery bad guy, like starting his like running jump to do his swing, and you'd see the whole Senate chamber in front of you. And that wouldn't have to be a big panel. You'd draw very small if it was a small panel.
Yeah, I think that bang, as you say, it must be the door, but maybe I guess the intent behind it is probably to make us think is that the great grenade going off, and then the reveal immediately over the page that it's the plastic one.
So did the plastic one have its own like surprise sound effect?
No. It's the door banging.
Okay.
But as a reader, you think, what is that bang?
Okay.
Is it the grenade going off?
So because a page earlier, a Joe breaks a similar door. Sherlock crashes through a door with her robot arm, and that doesn't get a bang. And in comics, sound effects are allowed to be inconsistent. If you do rat-tat-tat for one machine gun, you don't have to do it for everyone. But Okay, back to you.
And then that grenade being thrown. I wasn't entirely sure about Scarlett's reaction. No, sort of, slightly sort of victim there, Scarlett, rather than sort of proactive hero Scarlett. But I wondered whether there was an intent behind that to kind of allude back to the death of Snake Eyes issue, where sort of Snake Eyes flung himself after the grenade to save everyone, and ended in with her with his death, and kind of maybe it was trying to plug into that a little bit, and think that Scarlett is somewhat traumatized perhaps by grenades, and specifically and Snake and specifically as well the parallel of maybe Sean jumping for this grenade and potentially sacrificing himself as well to try and save Scarlett.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we've got this mysterious bad guy who appears to be a Cobra agent, because Dr. Mindbender refers to him as our asset. So he has sort of burst his way in, killed Senator Lartner with a fairly devastating crack to his neck. Your usefulness has expired. Before escaping and leaving him dead behind. So a couple of things to touch on there. We've got this mysterious figure here. Not much to go on beyond sort of seeing a bit of his face and his hands, and beyond that, it's all covered up by a hat, scarf. They could have even put gloves on him. Oh, they do have gloves on him in certain panels, but not all. There we go. Error detected. And it's very much hinted that he's the same person as Al Cobra, because in the exchange with Sherlock, he says, "You're cocky for a mere MP sergeant." She says, "Wait, how'd you? I've heard that voice before. My, aren't you the clever one?" So it's hinting that it's the person that she had encountered in the previous issue, and he was entirely covered up there too. So I guess that is the big mystery, is who is this guy? Do we want to start speculating? I think the issues have now all been written and mostly drawn, so we're probably free to speculate without it potentially causing any changes to the story at this point.
Since you're referring to their little exchange, Sherlock and Mystery Bad Guy, I should correct myself. The panel where she's running through the doorway, the door has already been broken off its hinge. It happens in the previous panel when she punches Mystery Bad Guy through it. Yeah. That does get a sound effect for the punch, whomp. So I apologize for getting the two panels mixed up. I had thought, last issue that Al Cobra, I thought, I guess this is Firefly, but I also feel like issue 250 wrapped up the Firefly arc, and if he came back, it was going to be, like as a Joe, or as like retired, or like trying to harm Cobra, not like a Cobra guy trying to help Cobra and stop the good guys.
Yeah.
I also wondered if. Hama's making a lot of new Joes here. I also wondered last issue if Hama was making a new Cobra. Mm-hmm. But I know that you have a guess.
So my guess when we were talking at the end of the last episode of Air, my guess was that it was the Black Major. So he was a character that has been introduced before. Not a huge amount known about him. We've not seen him for a little while. So it would be good to bring him back, and sort of some of those allusions to the sort of fanatical following that he had, and his shooting of the Cobra so that he could steal the Fang helicopter was keeping in line with the kind of character that he was, as in terms of particularly his Action Force appearance, where he wasn't particularly kind to his followers. So. Yeah, that was my little conjecture at the end of that episode. Now, I'm not so sure, just in terms of maybe the athleticism that he's sort of displaying here. It's though with that jump up into the gallery and that kind of thing. I'm now wondering if it might be somebody else. My second conjecture might be that it would be Xandar, again, another underused character, not completely, fully formed in the comics. Someone who is quite happy to fade into the background, not disguise his own identity. Would be very at ease behind a disguise, and in terms of some of those more athletic leaps and things, would seem believable. So that's my short list at the moment. We've got Black Major, Xandar, and Firefly, with Firefly being a little bit too obvious.
I think it's a new character. I'm happy to be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll find out in a month or two.
So after this senator had been killed, that was I don't know, it felt a bit somewhat dismissive of his death, or somewhat intentionally and unintentionally comical at the same time. So my quote of the week was Bottom Line, who said that Senator Lartner is as dead as significant tax reform, and apparently a Cobra agent to boot.
And in this panel, she's putting her 2 fingers to his neck, so she's checking his pulse.
Yeah. And then we've got Senator Ling Torres banging her gavel in a slightly comedic way of saying, "Order! The hearing's not yet adjourned." Let's keep the process. Ignore everything that's going on around us.
So I was struck, as you were, by the abruptness of Bottom Line's comment here. Right? She's making a joke, and I think this is Larry Hama's occasionally dark sense of humor.
Yeah.
Hit a book for kids. No, I'm not a kid, and I read this book. So I've previously referred to one of the differences between the Marvel issues and the Marvel and Devil's Due issues and the IDW issues is 2 pages. These comics all used to be 22 pages, and they're now all 20. And this happened, like 10, 15 years ago, as all the costs for the publishers went up and they wanted to keep the cover prices where they were. And now and then when I'm reading a comic book, I get to page 19 or 20 and I feel like the ending is either a little rushed, or if it was written by this same person in that earlier era, it would have some kind of epilogue. And in our Devil's Due episodes of the podcast, we're talking about these G.I. Joe issues from 2003, and many of them do have an epilogue, 1 or 2 page scene sort of after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I feel like in a different universe where IDW makes 22 page comics, there'd be 2 or 3 more panels where Bottom Line is reacting to, or even just like running up to the senator's corpse and saying these same things, but spread out over a few more panels. At the same time, we can also, I think, take a little bit of, the whole courtroom scene is a truncation, is an abbreviation of an actual Senate subcommittee hearing, right? Like, you see jury trials on TV and in movies, and they all take like 30 minutes, and then there's some revelation. And I've been on jury duty, and it was 5 days, and the first 2 days were just establishing the credentials of the witnesses. Right, like the experts, doctors who came in, who were just going to weigh in with their opinions. We hadn't even gotten to like, was a person harmed or not? And there was a lot of nitpicking between the 2 sets of lawyers. Like, one of the lawyers would ask one of these doctors to establish credentials, and it's like they'd ask 2 questions, and the other lawyer would say objection, because like you sort of need to ask 1 question at a time. And you see like a jury trial on TV, and the lawyer like rattles off this paragraph that like recaps the crime, and the person on the stand is like, yes, that's what happened. And I now, knowing a little bit of how it actually works, I can imagine the other lawyer saying like, no, that's objection, conjecture, right? It's like, you can't ask that question. You have to ask it as a factual yes or no question. So my point here is that even on pages 2 and 3 and 4, or 2 and 3, right, where I know the session is already in progress, but these two senators ask these questions of Hawk and caseload and bottom line, and we just immediately get to. I mean, there it is. What is Senator Ling Torres? Very well. My first question is to Hawk. Simply put, why? Like, that's a huge abbreviation of the actual, because this is a short story and you got to boil it down. So if Senator Lardner's death comes across as rushed or funny, or bottom line's reaction is rushed or funny or callous, it does stick out a little bit. But whether 20 or 22 pages, the story only has 20 or 22 pages. So let's get on with it.
The thing that sort of struck me about the conclusion of the issue and the way that mysterious Cobra came in and killed Lardner and brought things to a bit of an abrupt stop made me think that, it felt like the Joes were on the ropes. They were being given a grilling, that there was some sense of, jeopardy there. But the Cobras bursting into the room and killing the senators kind of seemed to do the Joes' job for them, really, to establish that, Cobra are dangerous. You need people to protect, the free world against them, and maybe things, were done, not by the books, but that's kind of what you need to do. So let's get up and at them, let them off the hook, get back out there fighting those bad guys. Don't you think?
Yeah, the issue didn't go in the direction that I thought, because as we said before, I expected the Joes to be in trouble. Cobra is sort of doing, that's a good point, Cobra is sort of doing the Joes' job for them here. But I chalk this up to this Hama thing where he's making up, but it's like the ending to the Cobra Civil War. The Cobra Civil War doesn't end with the Joes decisively, militarily defeating Serpentor or Zartan or Cobra Commander, right? Like Cobra ends the Civil War on its own. Mm-hmm. And so some of this is Hama making it up as he goes along. And sometimes you get like sublimity, right? Like issue 21, silent interlude, right? And sometimes you get fun surprises. And sometimes you get like crazy cliffhangers, like what is it, issue 114 or so, where the three Joes are in the what's the vehicle that's just the big green box from like 92?
The one that gets dropped out of space?
Yeah, and they're and the cliffhanger is like, oh no, our parachutes have torn. Ah! Right? Like that's Hama just writing himself into a corner, and then a few weeks later, like he has to figure it out. So I think three things are happening here. One, Hama's making it up as he goes along. Two, and he has good instincts, and it tends to work out. It tends to be satisfying or excellent. Two, I think he realizes in writing this issue that Ling Torres is valuable and he can use her later. And now the stakes are even higher. Or, as he says in answering a letter from some crazy person who writes in the back of the issue, he says, there's so many characters and it takes a long time to rotate them around. So just as it took a long time for Senator Ling Torres to come back, we're going to sort of think like in 3 years or 6 years when she comes back, we're going to think, man, it's been such a long time. Like, did Larry forget? Maybe. There's like 500 characters in this continuity. Or it's always on his list. It's like, I got to do an arc with the ninjas. I got to do an arc for the build up to 300. I got to do some self-contained. I got to give Helix something to do because I've decided I like her. Like, and then suddenly it's 2026. Oh, Senator Ling Torres.
Yeah. My instinct was that at the end of that last arc where she did appear is that it was almost a fizzle out, that they'd built her up as such this big character, and it didn't really play out, and sort of discarded. So I was glad that they came back to her as a character, because it had previously been so significant in terms of the build up.
I wish that the final page or final panel had more of a cliffhanger. This is my same comment from the previous issue, and that doesn't take away very much at all from how fun and satisfying this issue was for being a different kind of issue and also just a great issue. But, I also have to remind myself, there have been lots of issues of G.I. Joe where, the final panel is someone saying something and the final panel feels more like a transition and not like a cliffhanger. I think I always want a cliffhanger because the times that it has been a cliffhanger, it's been so damn compelling, right? Like the final page of 93, right? Like, luckily I had a contingency plan. Boom! Like, oh my God, are they dead? Right? Like, no, probably not. These characters are valuable, and like, the next issue is going to start with some explanation, or the next issue is going to jump ahead like 3 hours, and they're just all in the hospital and they survive, but they're in the hospital. Duke does promise us that something is going to happen, but it's not as if the final page is like, there's a bomb in Senator Lardner's jacket, everyone run, or like Senator Ling Torres like activates After All and pulls out a gun and aims it at Senator Raleigh. Like, those things would also be cool. They may be a little sort of overcooked. Not every issue has to end with some cliffhanger, and not every issue has to end with some cliffhanger that's like an action beat.
But yeah, I like the momentum here though, and it feels like you don't know where it's going to go next, but it will probably be cool.
Yeah. This is a good point in that if it's a cliffhanger, as exciting as that is for me as a reader, that means that this is very much just like chapter 2 of 5. And if I give this issue to someone to read, they might say, G.I. Joe's better than I thought. Thanks, Tim. But then they might also say, like, what, do you want me to read the next one? And if I give them an issue of Special Missions from 1988, or this issue, without a cliffhanger at the end, they might say, that was really satisfying, thanks. So a question that I have, and I'm not sure if Larry Hama knows it at this point in January when he's writing this issue, because he's making it up as he goes along, is the murder we see in this issue, is that the titular murder by assassination? Probably not, because there are 3 more chapters to go, and something's getting built up with the mystery bad guy and or Al Cobra, and Sherlock. I feel like Sherlock's being built up to do something. But note that a senator was assassinated in this issue. When I finished it, I turned back to the cover and I was like, oh, right, Chuckles wasn't in this issue. Oh, right, was that the murder by assassination?
Maybe we'll never know. We'll find out how many more murders there are by the time we get to the end of the arc.
I spy with my little eye.
Okay, I spy Duke with a kitty cup. So on the very last page, very last panel, on Duke's cup is Conrad Mauser, which is Diana Davis's cat, who we first saw as a commission for Diana, drawn by Jeremy Dale, which she shared with us on the sketchbook show that we did just a handful of weeks ago.
So for those of you who don't spend a lot of time on Facebook, Diana Davis, who's the research specialist on this comic, is a dog person, but saved an outdoor cat starting, I think, 2 years ago, and brought this cat, gave this cat medicine and treated this cat outside, and slowly she and her husband brought this cat inside, and this cat really flourished, and there's some really dramatic before and after photos, and 10 or 50 Facebook friends of Diana's on the internet really followed this saga when she would post photos of this older, healthy, happy, relieved cat. So as someone who has cats and likes cats, I really enjoyed that saga. And then this like amazing pun happens because Diana Davis's favorite Joe is Duke. Duke's real name is Conrad Hauser. When she adopted this cat, this sort of feral cat that had been outside for years and years and was sick, and she and her husband saved this cat. She was gonna take this cat back to like a rescue organization, and then they fell in love with the cat, and she had to come up with a name, and the name is Conrad Mauser, which is an amazing pun. And Conrad, who was at least like 16 years old, died recently. So this is both a cute reference, but also a little memorial. So it made me happy and sad. I spy on page 4 and on page 9 a few word balloons where the lettering is much smaller. There's a lot more white space around it. And this is one of 3 ways that a letterer in comics can show that a character is whispering. My favorite way, because it's old school, is a dashed or broken line as the oval outline for the word balloon. Marvel also, I think, experimented in the, I want to say late 90s, where, and actually maybe IDW, I can't remember, where the black outline and the black letters would be gray, which I don't think works because it's not very clear. And also you can make the lettering very small. Sometimes if the lettering is very small and the word balloon is also very small, that's a way of showing that someone is like down the hall and far away, and they might be speaking at a normal volume. You just can't hear them. So just a small language of comics, tools of the toolkit thing.
Final I Spy from me. Hawk's hair is brown again.
Yeah.
So again, your words have echoed through the ages and resulted in significant change, possibly, or it might just have happened anyway.
Maybe if the fine folks at IDW are listening to this, if they are fixing Hawk's hair in the previous issue, they can fix mystery bad guys' gloves at the end of this issue. There's this page where it goes from gloves to skin to gloves to skin. My favorite line is from page 7, panel 4. Caseload is explaining how the Joes work. In a way that I think somewhere in the back of my mind I had abstractly guessed, but no one's ever said it aloud. It's never been explained in the file cards or in a story, and it's really satisfying to get it explained here. This line, so this line is both like a dose of story logic. It's also really funny. He's explaining to this senator who's upset. He says, Ling Taurus says basically, wait, you all took vacation at the same time? What if there was a national emergency? And he says, we're not dealing with a standing garrison here. All leaves are assumed to be revocable at a moment's notice, and all personnel are required to be capable of being contacted. They're all on constant standby, so it doesn't matter where they are. The analogy would be a firehouse or EMT dispatch center. I love the juggling act that the multitasking that line does. It makes Snake Hunt make sense. Because back then, was it chapter 3 or 4 when they're like, we're all going to take vacation and go to Springfield. I thought, awesome. What? You can't do that, right? It's like when all the cops in The Dark Knight Rises, all of the cops, I'm rolling my eyes, go underground to stop Bane. It's like, really, Christopher Nolan? All of the cops? But I do like that. Yeah, I do like that movie.
The explanation though from Caseload is sort of simultaneously goes, oh yeah, okay, that's a good explanation, but also what? That doesn't make any sense. If all of the people from a firehouse went on vacation at the same time and traveled halfway across the country, that wouldn't be good. What if there was a fire?
Again, this is like the cats in the Luxembourg cat face act, the Schrödinger Katzen act, right? So this is Hama taking this very seriously because there should be internal story logic and people who are reading it are invested, but also not taking it seriously and having fun. Hama is doing 2 things that sort of can't happen at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so next up, Yo Joage.
I think we have to talk about this angry, vicious, ranting letter from this upset, crazy British G.I. Joe, I'm going to say this with finger quotes, fan, who gets not only a letter in the letters page, but the only letter, because it's so long, it just goes on and on and on.
You say
I'm kidding.
Long, other people are saying so good. I'm
kidding.
Possibly
I'm kidding,
the greatest letter published.
Oh, okay. I'm going to turn around and welcome Mark to the club. Having had a letter or two printed in Postbox the Pit, I want to say congratulations to Mark for getting a letter printed in Postbox the Pit.
Thank you.
And I would say this, even if I weren't sucking up to my co-host, it's a good letter because it's complimentary, which I think is always helpful. It's polite. It brings up a concern. A lot of readers are concerned that Larry Hama might forget a character or might make a mistake, because there have been one or two of those. And yet, this letter does so with a light touch in referring to the October Guard's appearance in Snake Hunt. And then Mark does something that surprisingly few letters do that get printed in the book, which is make suggestions for what this reader, Mark, would like to see in the book. They're very clear, they're very specific, they're very interesting and sort of fun and helpful. They're numbered, and also half them, at least, I'm nodding in agreement, right? So I'd like to see this guy, I'd like to see us go there, I'd like to know what happened here. Do you think you could reveal one more thing about this other thing? Mm-hmm. Whatever happened to that guy? And then my favorite, hey, can we get these 3 awesome artists back to draw some issues or pages? And sometimes Larry doesn't answer all the questions, either because they're not numbered and it sort of gets jumbled, or I think questions don't need answering, or because they have been answered a million times before. And Larry answers each of these questions corresponding to their number. So not only congrats to Mark for a letter, congrats to Mark for a good letter.
Thank you. Shall I read it, and I'll be me and you can be Larry, so that we can intercut the question and answer?
I'll sure. I'll try my best Larry impression.
I'll get your coffee first. Dear Larry and Co., I really enjoyed the Snake Hunt epic. Robert Atkins is a very natural fit for the Joe book, so it was good to see him on the ARAH book after his prior runs in the IDW continuity. Editor's note, I did enjoy Snake Hunt. I did complain a little bit, but I think overall I did like it, particularly looking back on the story, and this was written on Boxing Day. So I was full of Christmas cheer and in a good mood, and sort of maybe being a bit more half full than maybe I could have been at the time. I think that Chief certainly was very down on the arc as we were reading it, and I was more positive. There were elements that did irk me, and I didn't think necessarily worked completely, but I think overall I did enjoy it, and I did like the art. Editor's commentary stops.
All right, so you're back to the letter now.
Yes. I was initially worried that the return of the October Guard might be another case of accidentally bringing back characters from the dead, but I am confident it was intended and that you have plans for this one. I'm curious to see the backstory. Could it be related to the appearance of Red Star back in 135, who looked exactly like the late Colonel Brekov? There would seem to be a trail of breadcrumbs there that you could follow back if you wanted to. A few things that I'd like to see in the book. 1. We last saw Cobra Island back in issue 134 as a somewhat desolate landscape, populated by red ninjas and bats, since being abandoned by Cobra. A return to Cobra Island might be a story ripe with possibilities, and one hinted at in the recent G.I. Joe classified toys.
Mark, return to Cobra Island does sound like an interesting springboard. It might bear looking into. It is certainly a location rife with revenants.
Elements and revenants. 2. It would be interesting to find out more about the Black Major and the Red Shadows, and what it is that makes this particular faction unique from the rest of Cobra.
Ditto with Black Major and the Red Shadows, but bear in mind, with over 100 major characters and even more supporting characters, it takes a while for a rotation to bring some back into the spotlight.
3. A very early incarnation of G.I. Joe was hinted at in a flashback to the attempted rescue of Claire Hauser, and it would be more interesting to find out about that era.
Claire makes an appearance in number 281.
Not the question I asked, but thanks. 4. Sneak Peek died off screen, and I think it would make for an intriguing plot if this was just a ruse to enable him to remain in deep cover in Dark Colonia with the Resistance, and more significantly, with his romantic interest.
I think we've played with Sneak Peek's resuscitation a bit too much. Maybe he can appear in an untold tale.
5. Whatever happened to the robotic Storm Shadow introduced in Cobra's Venom arc?
Yet another candidate for resuscitation.
6. With the Untold Tales theme, it would be great to see some of the previous art legends on interiors. Wiggum, Wagner, Bright, even just for a handful of pages or for a flashback scene.
I can see the current artists doing their own versions of classic scenes and images, but I believe inserting the actual vintage artwork into the mix might be too visually jarring. The difference in modes of coloring would be only one obstacle.
Crosswires, Larry. I meant get them back to do new art, not just show the vintage artwork. Oh, well, maybe I'll talk about that in my next letter. Keep making the book, and I'll keep buying it. Yo, Joe! Mark, that's me!
Will you buy an extra copy and razor out this page and frame it and put it on the wall?
I don't think I'll be going to that length.
Because the first time a famous comics person sent me a letter, I framed it and put it on the wall.
Okay.
I should say that's only happened like 2 times, so this isn't like, I don't have a wall of this. An upcoming episode of the Talking Joe live stream, instead of showing you convention sketches and commissions, I can show you the 2 letters from famous comics people. Anyway.
Was one of them Steve Ditko? He was a prolific letter writer.
No, but I just realized that new book from Hermes Press called The Ditko Shrugged, which just came out. It's expensive. It's $50, but I thought it was sort of one more biography of Ditko, and in fact, it's a big interview book with him. With I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the writer's name. This guy corresponded with Ditko for years. So, and this book is thumbs up from the Ditko family. So I wasn't interested when I thought it was just one more book about him, because there have been several. This might be a definitive book. Anyway, I think we were talking about G.I. Joe.
There was a great letter to him which said, "Dear Steve, any chance that you could send me a signature?" And it would be, "Dear Sir, apologies, I do not send signatures. Signed, Steve Ditko." Anyway.
Shall we? Wait, that's a real story?
That's a real story.
Shall we rate this on a scale of 1 to 10?
Oh, yes. You go first.
7. As you might be able to guess, not my favorite coloring in this series, and Griffith's art and storytelling good, but a little less than the previous issue, as we spoke of. But lots of surprises, character moments. The senator forcing Throwdown to take his mask off, which recalls some previous moments in G.I. Joe continuity, and then when he does, it's upsetting. New characters and moves the story along. So could have been an 8 with a few a 7, but a very happy 7. I was happy when I finished this issue.
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar place. I think I'll go 7. I did really enjoy the issue. I'm looking forward to where this art goes. Yeah, at times possibly the art did look a tiny bit rushed, not bad, and not affecting my enjoyment of the issue. And just a couple of those story beats maybe not quite working for me. So I think, yeah, that lingering sort of question in my mind of, if Cobras hadn't invaded the chambers and killed that senator, would Cobra have actually been a lot better off in terms of then the Joes getting some real scrutiny, possibly less of a fun action sequence to be had from an extended run, which is entirely set in a Senate hearing. But so I can understand that. But yeah, question mark there from me.
I have two final thoughts on the issue, just little bits. One, we see Sherlock in her, final costume, both on the cover and also the teaser cover, the ad for the next issue, and it says on her hat, police federal agent, and it says on her armor, police federal agent, and that might be realistic, but I think from a design standpoint, that is a place to have one of those be a symbol, whether it's a G.I. Joe symbol or a law enforcement symbol or something made up. And certainly we see a lot of Cobra characters where they have a Cobra logo on their head or mask or helmet, and then also on their chest or their arms. But I think for Joe, it's a smidge redundant. And then the second thing is, you'll probably refer to this when you tease for the next issue. In the letters page, editor Tom Waltz says that next month, chapter 3 of this story, quote, "We're taking a quick detour next month from the main storyline," unquote. So Shannon Gallant is going to come back and draw this issue, and then chapters 4 and 5 should be Andrew Griffith, and this is Waltz again. "More than one surprise guest ties directly into our current arc. Can't miss issue, I promise." So I am intrigued that the middle of this 5-part story is going to take a detour. I'm also happy that if it's going to do that, and this story needed, I guess, a fill-in artist, to use that term, that that artist gets put on the chapter that is related but is a detour. I'd rather that than Griffith draw chapters 1 through 4, and then Gallant comes in to sort of save the schedule with chapter 5. That would feel a little disruptive. So I'm rubbing my hands together, and I'm properly psyched for next issue being different, but also urgent.
Excellent.
Question: what did we ask this week? Let's find out as we speak.
Right, so a change of pace. Let's revisit an old feature, listeners' questions. So I asked on the Facebook group, where do you listen to the Talking Joe podcast? And got some interesting answers back. We had Ewan, who said that he listens to and from work, which is less exciting, but in Auckland, New Zealand. And I was conjuring up visions there of, driving to work through Hobbit-like beautiful scenery over there in New Zealand.
They also have cities there.
No, I think that's just a myth. Then we had Bart, who is driving in cars, working around the house, or maybe on the motorbike, and he shared some of his sweet custom motorcycle helmets that he creates, including Transformers themed helmets. SJub7 came in with an entirely serious answer. I draw a deep bath, scented bubbles, light candles. Press play.
This is an amazing bit of synchronicity, because not when I'm recording from California visiting family, but all of the other episodes that I've been co-host, I also draw a bath, scented candles, bubbles, and I bring the microphone close to me, but I'm very still. I don't move, so you can't hear the bath.
I see.
So we have something in common.
Okay, recording and listening. Peter, some loser who may or may not be my brother, generally in the car. I also think that this is a stupid question. Thanks for your input, Peter. Carol, aka Richard, says starts with the introductory stuff on the Friday morning or earlier if he's getting an advanced preview via Patreon. journeys into work on the Tyne and Wear Metro, experiences deep despair as you tear into the latest Devil's Due issues during lunchtime, enjoy working out which toy is being looked at on the journey home, and finish off in the scant hours of the evening before sleep time. Basically, it makes Fridays worthwhile. Ah.
For those of you who are, I guess, only listening to the Real American Hero episodes and not the Devil's Due episodes, we have been tough. I've been very tough on Devil's Due, but I should note that the last arc, all three of us were complimentary and happy, and the future looks bright. So if it's a bummer to listen to the podcast when I'm complaining about Devil's Due comics, I know that writer and artist changes are coming up in that continuity in our read through. So come back, or stick around, or thanks. Everyone draw a bath.
Richard's comment on the most recent episode where we were more complimentary was that Mr. Finn has seen the light. There is no going back now. So my response was, one swallow does not make a summer. We shall see. We've still got the last arc of the Blaylock era to go through next. So fingers crossed. We'll keep on that vein of positivity and keep on on the up and up.
Thank you, listeners, for chiming in. This is even a little bit of feedback, even 4 or 5 people typing one sentence means a lot and is interesting and helpful. So for those of you who, you're scrolling through Facebook or you're getting an email and you're the type of person who reads it, nods and says, that's interesting, I'm not going to type. I'm not going to click reply all. Even your 20 seconds is appreciated.
Yeah, and me and Chief used to do the listener's question as a regular feature, so it is something we can revisit. And if there's a particular question that you would like to be asked, then we can indeed pose that question.
Maybe the next listener question is, how big is the bathtub in which you listen to or record? All right, that joke's good and done.
Okay, cool. Have you got like a parakeet or something in your background?
Yes.
There. There it is.
This house has a dog and a bird. Every morning when I see the bird, whose name is Ontario, I whistle some music from Peter and the Wolf or the John Williams Superman theme, because I want to give him a little something meatier than just like hello or like good morning or like Ontario, and then the bird chirps like rap, 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 saying its name.
Okay, so I think that is us done with the show. Fun for me, as always, if for nobody else. Next time on Talking Joe, we will be talking on the Disavowed show, issues 22 to 25, which is a 4-parter called The Last Stand, which builds on the alluded to return of Serpentor. A lot of a big blockbuster conclusion to the Josh Blaylock written era of Devil's Due G.I. Joe. And then back over here, when the next issue comes out, we will be covering that. It will be Murder, Mystery, and Mayhem continuing as the newest Joe continues her investigation into Cobra Chaos. Can she, with the help of some special friends, solve the mystery and save the day before it's too late? The plot thickens as returning artist S.L. Gallant joins the team to continue the bombastic tale featuring the G.I. Joe known as Sherlock. Tim, where can people find you if they're not just trying to poke their noses through windows in California, which would take an awful long time to track you down?
Instagram, A Real American Book. Facebook, A Real American Book. And best of all, a website, which I call my blog, arealamericanbook.com.
Excellent. And if you want to find more about the show, you can find us in the usual places. Those places are linked to on talkingjoe.co.uk, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, We are also on Patreon, and a big thanks to all of our backers, Richard, Sam, Jay, Bill, Christopher, and Justin, who are all getting early access to episodes, as well as some exclusive bonus content. So that just leaves us to say, when all is said and done, you can catch us down the road.
Because we've been Talking Joe.
And we're all at a Joe's. Laters.
Too much bird in the background? Sorry about that. Bird gets excited when people start to come downstairs.